Location New York, John F. Kennedy International Airport, NY, JFK, KJFK. Boeing 777 328-hour. Flight 0111. Time April the 4th, 2022, 9 p.m. As the moon rises from the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the endless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, Air France Flight 0111 embarked on its journey from New York to Paris. Little did the passengers and crew know that they were about to embark on a flight that would forever be etched in the annals of aviation history as one of the most haunted. As the aircraft soared through the darkening skies, strange occurrences began to unfold. The crew was hit by some of strange paranormal activity that seemed to have taken hold of Flight 0111. Electronic devices malfunctioned inexplicably. Flight control began to act by itself, and the flight instruments began to behave erratically, defying all logic and reason. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the flight was the inexplicable sense of dread that hung heavy in the air, suffocating all who dared to breathe it in. It was as though an unseen presence lurked in the shadows, watching, waiting, and biding its time. Despite the crew's best efforts to reassure the passengers and maintain control of the aircraft, the situation continued to deteriorate rapidly. Panic gripped the hearts of all on board as they realized they were at the mercy of forces beyond their comprehension. As the minutes dragged on, the once bustling cabin fell silent, save for the occasional whimper or prayer uttered in desperation. It was as though Flight 0111 had become a ghost ship, adrift in a sea of darkness, its fate hanging precariously in the balance. Stay tuned. On Tuesday, 5 April 2022, the Boeing 777 registered FGS-QJ, operated by Air France, was programmed to carry out a scheduled flight AF-11 between New York JFK and Paris Charles de Gaulle. 15 crew members, 2 flight crew, 13 cabin crew, and 177 passengers were on board, with a total 192 sole on board. At 9 o'clock in the evening on Air France, Flight 11 pushed back from the gate at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. Takeoff was at 01.161 UTC. The captain was 53 years old and quite experienced, with just under 11,700 hours of total time. And he had operated as a captain on the Trip 7 for about 1/200 of those hours. Prior to that, he had been flying as a captain on the Airbus A320. The first officer was also quite experienced, with just under 5,200 hours of total time, and 869 of those had been flown on the Trip 7. He had previously also been flying on the Airbus A320 up until about 3 years prior to this incident, and the fact that both of these pilots had extensive Airbus experience could possibly play a small part in what's about to happen. The 777 is a modern long-haul passenger aircraft. It has an excellent safety record and remains one of the most technologically sophisticated and fuel-efficient aircraft in the skies. It is one of only 2 Boeing aircraft with fly-by-wire technology, meaning that all pilot inputs on the controls are fed through computers before the flight control surfaces. On the wings and tailplane are moved. This reduces the chances that pilot will inadvertently put the aircraft in a dangerous position, like an aerodynamic stall, an overspeed, or a bank angle that is too steep. The particular aircraft being used for this flight was 17 years old, having first entered service in the year 2005. What's also worth noting here was that on the 8th of February, just about 2 months before this flight, the French aviation authorities had issued a general safety information publication about the possible risks of interference between 5G signals and the radio altimeters installed on certain aircraft, and the Boeing Tri-7 was one of those affected. Now maybe you remember this whole debacle, since it blew up as quite a big scandal in the United States, but in Europe the 5G networks actually operated on a lower frequency band, which was further away from the radar altimeter, and therefore not really an issue there. Now that detail, though, was maybe not that clearly communicated by the authorities. What this all meant was that there was a lot of chatter between pilots about what this type of interference could potentially lead to. The flight progressed as normal over the Atlantic, and by 7:30 in the morning, Local time, the aircraft had begun its descent into Paris. The first officer sitting in the right-hand seat would be flying the approach and landing the aircraft at Charles de Gaulle. He would be using runway 26 left, which would require him to fly out to the east of the airport, and then to turn 180 degrees to line up with the westerly-facing runway. The Air France 777 descended gracefully, its landing gear extending like talons. But then something shifted. The flight path oscillated, a dance of uncertainty. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's microphones captured dramatic audio. The plane wavered, yet no emergency declaration echoed through the cabin. It touched down normally, as if the turbulence were mere turbulence. On final, the 777 was established on the localizer and glide slope ILS beams. At 07:49, the crew were cleared to land. They configured the 777 for landing. The selected speed was 140 kT. The crew then carried out the landing checklist. At 07:50:20, when the aircraft was at an altitude of 1,670 ft, the PF continued the approach in manual flight. He disconnected the autopilot, AP, leaving the auto throttle, AT, and the flight directors, FD, activated. He then made inputs on the controls for around 15 seconds. The 777 followed the movement of the controls and stayed on the ILS path, the left and right roll being less than 2 degrees. In the subsequent 10 seconds, there were less inputs on the wheel. The co-pilot then made inputs on the control column and wheel with a greater frequency. The amplitude was still small. The 777 followed the commands, the left and right roll being less than 3 degrees. At 07:51:06, the co-pilot expressed his astonishment with respect to the 777's bank angle. The roll inputs were amplified, and the average position of the wheel was at around 6 degrees to the left. The 777 turned left with a small bank angle. The captain voiced his surprise with respect to the deviation from the flight path. At 7:51:12, when the aircraft was at an altitude of 115 ft, banked 7 degrees to the left, with the wheel oriented 16 degrees to the left, the crew carried out a go-around. Up until the go-around, the flight path had remained within the operator's stabilization criteria. The recorded parameters show that the two pilots then simultaneously made inputs on the controls. In the following second, the position of the wheel reached a maximum value of 27 degrees to the left. 1 second later, the roll reached a maximum value of 15 degrees to the left, and the nose-up attitude was 12 degrees. At 07:51:16, the captain commented that the plane was going left. The control columns were then desynchronized for 14 seconds due to opposing forces. The captain held the control column in a slightly nose-down position, while the co-pilot made several more pronounced nose-up inputs. 2 brief episodes of wheel desynchronization were also observed. At 07:51:20, the go-around switches were pushed again, increasing the thrust to the maximum thrust available. At 07:51:23, the pitch reached a maximum value of 24 degrees. At 07:51:25, the co-pilot called out positive climb and retracted the landing gear. The configuration warning was displayed and the associated oral warning siren sounded. The two pilots continued to simultaneously make inputs on the controls. The captain made more pronounced nose-down inputs for a few seconds. At 07:52:06, the captain was the sole person making inputs. The crew completed the go-around actions. The crew analyzed the situation without perceiving the antagonistic inputs made on the controls and the desynchronizations of the control channels. They considered that they could use the AP again and carry out a new approach. The co-pilot became the PF again. The captain informed the controller that there had been a problem on the flight controls and asked to join the final for runway 27R. The approach and landing took place without further incident. The sustained input on the controls led to the PTT button and the AP disconnect switch being involuntarily pressed, the latter action causing several activations of the associated warning. No failure warning was activated during the occurrence. No anomaly was observed on the 777. At this stage, the analysis of the parameters does not show inconsistencies. in particular between the movements of the controls and the movements of the aeroplane. The validation and the analysis of the parameters are continuing. Particular attention will be given to reproducing the forces applied to the controls and to the relationship between these forces and the movements of the controls. In the rarefied skies above Paris, an ordinary transatlantic flight metamorphosed into an extraordinary battle for control. The seasoned crew of Air France Flight 11, a Boeing 777-300ER, found themselves grappling with an unseen force that transcended the boundaries of their expertise and training. Buckle up as we delve into the gripping tale of this aviation enigma. At first, it appeared to be a mere technical hiccup, a glitch in the intricate machinery of the Boeing 777. The flight control systems, designed to be precise and predictable, had seemingly betrayed their creators. But this was no ordinary malfunction. The two pilots ensconced in the cockpit were unwittingly engaged in a high-stakes duel with an invisible adversary. Picture this: the captain and the first officer, both seasoned aviators, each gripping the control yoke with determination. Yet their inputs were diametrically opposed. One tugged left, while the other pushed right. The result? The aircraft wavered, its bank angle oscillating erratically, akin to a pendulum caught in a tempest. The investigation ruled out mechanical malfunctions. The aircraft systems were impeccable. Instead, the cockpit had become an arena where human intuition grappled with machine precision. The pilots, their minds racing, had unwittingly engaged in a cerebral chess match. Each input, each twist of the yoke had consequences that rippled through the airframe. Air France Flight 11 serves as a poignant reminder that even in our era of advanced avionics and artificial intelligence, the human element remains pivotal. Amidst the unseen forces, whether cosmic radiation, electromagnetic anomalies, or psychological stress, the pilots grappled with their instincts, their training, and their unwavering commitment to safety. The skies may be vast, but sometimes the greatest mysteries unfold within the confines of a cockpit. The echoes of another tragedy resonate. The haunting memory of Air France Flight 447, lost over the Atlantic in 2009. The black box revealed confusion, disorientation, and a desperate struggle. Now, Air France No. 7 adds another layer to aviation's enigma.